As is often the case, one topic will seem to float to the top over a period of a few days to a week. So I'll have a few different people ask me in one form or another about a certain topic or issue that comes up in the process of realization. And then I just interpret that as the need to make a video. So one person in comments asked me about this stage of experience that is reasonably common where one has had an awakening at some time in the past. And perhaps a lot of emotion work has been done, or letting go of dualistic energy. Things have calmed down a lot. And at some point you find yourself in this sort of experience of pure awareness or formless awareness. And your experience gets reasonably thin as far as not a lot of texture. Things are very calm. There's not a lot to look at, it would seem. Perhaps not very many thoughts. Or the emotional landscape has become very calm. And yet there is some sense of contraction, or something hasn't finished yet. That this process has not completed. And this perception is a blessing, because indeed there is more to explore. This place that people find themselves in, I've even referred to as the awareness trap on occasion. There are even some teachers who are pretty deeply realized who teach in this way, some explicitly talking about formless awareness being the sort of ground of all experience, or the final stage of realization in one way or another. And others don't necessarily use that terminology, but when I interact with them directly about this process in their experience, it becomes obvious that this is sort of where things have gone for them. So what do you do in this situation? Oh, I should also mention there's often this sense of there's no one to do anything. There's no doer, or the sense of agency doesn't seem to be there. Now also there's a line of teaching in the sort of Neo-Advaita circles. You can find a lot of online videos around this stuff, where the teaching is very much along these lines. There's no one who can wake up. The sense of the me that wants to wake up is just fooling itself. It's not even really there. It just lives by seeking. And seeking enlightenment is no different than seeking material objects. So there's nothing for the me to do. There's nothing for that me to discover. The me can't know enlightenment or awakening, because those terms don't refer to anything that has to do with a me or a sense of agency or doership. There is just what is, and in what is, there is no doer. There's no separate anything, and the sense of separation, creating the sense of a seeker, which is illusory in nature, can never solve itself. It can never solve its own problem, because it's propagating its own problem by believing in itself. But even it is not really there, so there's nothing that can be done about this. In my experience, if you take this to mean that there's no practice at all, no way to practice, no way to inquire, because there's no one to inquire, that's a mistake. The message, when transmitted directly, can be powerful and effective. But if you take it to mean that there's nothing I need to do or nothing I can do, you can fool yourself. Because the people who speak in this way themselves did a lot of work, of course. But they'll always avoid that question when people ask, because they'll say there's no one that could have done that, right? So I think the mistake there is in the rigidity of that communication, that it's meant to transmit directly, and it does have a powerful transmission. But when you take it to mean that when you're not listening to a message like that, there's nothing to do, that no work can be done, that no choice can be made because there's no choice maker, you're making a mistake, potentially. Especially if your sense is that something more needs to be done, that realization has not completed itself no matter how many times you've listened to that message. Now, even aside from listening to that message, it is not uncommon that we find ourselves in this sort of formless awareness, this place of a sort of infinite, vast nothingness. And from that perspective, it seems like there's nothing there left to do because there's no one to do it. I think the problem with this is it's still a perspective. If you really look closely at what's going on in your experience, you're going to see that awareness is a subtle thought. You will not find awareness in your direct experience like you find sound. Turn your attention to sound right now. Turn your attention to sensation. You can feel it directly. You find it immediately. Turn your attention to awareness. What do you actually find? Are you clear on that? Take away the word awareness and look there. Take away the image of spaciousness or blackness or nothingness, whatever that is, no matter how subtle it is. Where's your attention? If you follow this to its conclusion, you'll find attention really has nowhere to go but the senses and consciousness. Consciousness being thought, which can take the form of subtle visual experiences, non-conceptual thought, or narratives, labels, stories, beliefs, etc. If you continue to work at this, it will become clearer and clearer. The sense of some vast non-thing called awareness will actually start to dissipate. You can't find awareness apart from the sounds, the sensations, or even thoughts. Awareness is an aspect of these experiences, if it's anything at all. So, experientially, what's the difference when this shift starts to happen, this turn? Sometimes I just call it the turn, because it has to happen when realization matures. The experiential difference is actually quite dramatic. In awareness, there's a feeling of spaciousness, nothingness, a void of experience almost. And there can be subtle contraction. And the natural tendency is sort of to become aware of the contraction, or sort of avoidant in a sense, if you can look into it closely. Contrast that to when this awareness belief, or experiential belief, let's say, as a background collapses into the experience itself, or is just seen to have never been there. This is extremely intimate. The difference is intimacy. The difference is vibrancy and aliveness, luminous nature of sense experience. The phenomena are alive and immediately here, undeniably close, undeniably vibrant. And at some point, there's no sense of an external world at all. There's not some spacious place called awareness, or called whatever. There's not spaciousness. Infinity is in the finite. Infinity is infinite depth, infinite subtlety, infinite manifestation, and an infinite fascination with the line that's not existent, but appears to be existent between reality and unreality, between everything and nothing. This kind of aliveness could never be encapsulated by describing a ground of being, or a vastness of spaciousness, or a nothingness. It's just not like that. So the key is intimacy. The key is a radiance that comes from center everywhere. You could say awareness is something like centerlessness. And after this shift, it's more like the center is everywhere. And then everywhereness doesn't even make sense. Spaciousness doesn't make sense, because the paradigm of space itself, instead of being reified into some infinite experience like awareness, it is seen to be non-existent, which is very different. There's no such thing as space. There's no such thing as distance at all anymore. So now you experience one phenomenon as all phenomenon. The infinity is the infinity of identity. One phenomenal experience, which is non-dual experience, not apart from, no subject-object, fully immerses itself and comes forth as the entirety of the cosmos right here, in one sound, in one leaf falling, in one gaze towards the heavens at night. That's it. So the intimacy is radical here. The other aspect I want to address is the sense of doership or agency. It's very easy to hear about non-agency, non-doership, and sort of find it in your experience. Look in your experience and you can sort of see that it's not really there, that a doer is a thought, doership is a thought, agency is a thought. But if you're really clear with your experience, or you're really honest with yourself and authentic about what's happening, do you still feel like you have choice in some situations? Perhaps not spiritual situations, but as you're moving through life, is a sense of agency there at all? And you might find that it actually still is. Maybe it's subtle, maybe it's just situational and you don't always notice it. But regardless of whether you can perceive it directly in that way, the sense of agency isn't completely dissolved until the sense of an external world is completely dissolved, until there's radical intimacy. And from there, it's not a thing you think about or not a thing you concern yourself with. It's not a problem because it's just obvious how this is. And it doesn't mean that there's not any sort of choice. It's just very clear that there's no one making that choice. It's no choice maker, no one standing apart, comparing two possibilities and analyzing. It's just the whole marvelous experience of reality coming forth as whatever's happening. And it can choose this or choose that. It can move in this direction or that direction, apparently. Directions are dependently originated as well, but the apparent experience has no problem making choices. So if we have a sort of cognitive or mental version of non-doership, we can fool ourselves. Another way of saying this is when you order food at a restaurant and the waiter says, "What do you want to have for dinner? What are you choosing?" Do you say, "Well, there's no choice maker, so I can't choose anything. There's nothing that can be chosen"? And then you just sort of stare at the waiter and they stare back at you and think you're an idiot, right? Well, that doesn't happen. Why doesn't that happen? Why is spirituality special? Why do we treat it as special in that when we talk about awakening or inquiry or meditation, well, there's no one can do it, so I'm not going to do that. So, right? Why do we treat that as special? At some point, realization has to include everything. You have to take it off the mat fully, which means every experience, every moment. So if you find special cases where you treat a certain movement in life differently or special because of some spiritual understanding, then you might be bypassing to some degree or not seeing where inquiry can actually reveal a deeper understanding or a deeper truth. So it is still valuable to inquire ongoing as realization progresses, even after the subtle self-sense is dissolved, although there's no one doing the inquiry at that point. Inquiry just continues and carries on. It's a sort of just reality's fascination with itself, experience's fascination with itself, and its fascination with the fact that there is nothing behind it at all, that it's completely devoid of any solidity, essence, and yet it comes forth as these solid textures of life. It's a miracle. It's miraculous, moment to moment. So the inquiry doesn't stop there. It's more like the fascination, the curiosity, endless curiosity and love is built into experience itself. So if inquiry is done properly, it's sort of a continuum into this love and fascination for experience. And at some point, the subtle self-sense even drops away, and that's a very radically different experience of life. There is no distance. There's nothing apart. There's no problem to solve anymore at all. And importantly, there's nothing in between the gaps. The experience is complete, moment to moment. And there's no moment to moment because it's only appearing here. You could say you live at the event horizon between radically intimate, appearing universe and absolutely nothing at all. But neither of those aspects are emphasized. They are literally one and the same. So from there, the sense of agency is completely dissolved. And there's no question about it. There's no concern for it. Because it's seen how effortlessly reality expresses here, moment to moment to moment. In any situation, the spontaneity and clarity is self-manifesting, self-dissolving, obvious, clear, intimate. So then on a practical note, what do you do in this situation? Well, the two areas to inquire into, in my opinion, are equanimity and non-duality. As Adyashanti says, and rightly so, what a lot of people consider to be non-duality is a very stark duality. It's awareness and everything else. This is the awareness trap. So the inquiry into non-duality is along the lines of the videos in my playlist called Non-Duality. It's very specific to the senses. It's dissolving the subject-object construct, or seeing the illusory nature of that subject-object construct through investigating the radiant presentation of the sense fields. There's various ways to do it, but ultimately you just move your attention into those sense fields and let them show you what they are, how they function, how they have no side, no inside, no outside, no front side, no back side, not coming from somewhere, not going anywhere. They don't exist in space or time. Space and time are created by the phenomenal experience. So that's investigation of non-duality, and it will clarify. As far as awareness, you can look for where awareness comes in contact with the senses themselves. Sound. Where do you find awareness coming in contact with sound? If anywhere, do you find a dividing line? You can do this with any sense field. And equanimity is looking into the areas in your life where you feel triggered, even subtly, even triggered by thoughts or beliefs or contractions. So the Equanimity playlist has some strategies on this as well. So those are the two general areas I would recommend looking into. And over time, you'll start to feel this intimacy. Instead of expansive nothingness of awareness, there's infinite depth in vibrant zero distance experience, intimacy. And over time, that sense of contraction, that sense of the watcher state, the sense of the subtle self hiding somewhere and still suffering will dissolve.